Always, this business research deals with human behavior and the nature as well as characteristics of human is not one and the same. Whenever he collects the information from the respondents has to know what is the purpose of collecting the information. Researcher has to make sure that he will take care all the safety measures to do the research work properly. Being a researcher, he has to take care or he has to make sure that the respondents are very safe. So, this is also one of the ethical issues. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. My dear students, today we are in the fourth session of the unit, that is Introduction to Business Research of the subject Business Research Method, and this is for 5th Sem BCom students. So let us quickly recall what we have discussed in our previous session. So in a previous session, I have covered this topic, that is scientific approach to business research. That is whether science can be completely applied to business research or not. So we have already discussed in a previous session. So in order to tell here, so we cannot completely apply science to business research because in science we get the exact result. But when compared to business research, we always deal with the human behavior and the way of or the nature of human behavior is not one and the same. So, it is different. So, it may be relating to the taste and preference of the consumers or any other activity which is related to human, they are not one and the same. So, we cannot completely apply science to business research because of this limitation. So, and we also have discussed about limitations of applying scientific method to business research method. So, we have seen what are the various limitations, why we can't apply science to business research, so that we have learnt in a previous session, and this type of question might be asked for 10 marks in your exam. That is, what is scientific approach to business research and explain the limitations why science cannot be applied to business research. The main reason is that always this business research deals with human behavior and the nature as well as characteristics of human is not one and the same. It is totally different from one person to another person. So, this would be the main limitations and all other limitations I have discussed in a previous session. So, this is about the topic what I have discussed in a previous session. In today's session, we shall continue with new topic, that is ethical issues in business research. Of course, I have told you business research always deals with the human behavior. So, there should be some ethics, correct? So, while collecting the information from the respondents by the researcher, there should be some ethical issues. So, let us see what are those ethical issues that has to be there in business research. So, first we shall see about ethics. So, ethics is universally accepted standard that guides the human behavior. So, I have told you always business research deals with human behavior. So, ethics means what? It is universally accepted standard that guides the human behavior. As we know, scientific research is conducted in a controlled laboratories. So, unlike science, we cannot do this business research in a confined laboratories. But science or scientific research is conducted in a controlled laboratories. Business research is conducted on individuals or professionals of the business organization. So, whatever may be the reason, we cannot conduct this business research in a confined laboratory like science. In science, if we do an experiment 100 times, we get the exact result. But it is highly impossible in case of business research because we always deals with the human behavior. The scope of business research involves various individuals or organization. So, we know the nature as well as significance of each and every organization is different. In the same time, the nature of individuals also is different. So, the scope of business research involves various individuals or organization. So, normally the business research deals with individuals or organization. Therefore, the purpose of research is to conduct it on ethical lines without affecting any individual behavior. So, what the researcher has to keep in his mind, so he has to conduct the business research but make sure that he will not hurt any of the individual or institution. So he has to make sure that he has to follow all the ethical issues which will not affect the individual behavior. Ethical research requires personal honesty from the researcher. So he has to make sure that he will not affect any of the individuals or organization, so that he has to follow properly all the ethical issues of business research. The researcher, while conducting the research work, follow ethical principles and arrive unbiased result. So he should get a proper result on his research work by making sure that he will not affect any of the individual or institution which is related to that particular business research. Now what you have to remember here, ethical issues means what? We know business research always deals with individuals or organization. So being a researcher, he has to make sure that he have to follow all the ethical issues. Now what do you mean by ethical issues? It is universally accepted standard which will not affect any of the individual or organization. Now coming to list of ethical issues which has to be followed by the business research. So the first one is informed consent. So I'll discuss each and every point in detail in this particular session. So the first point is that informed consent, and the second one is respecting the contract. So there is a contract between the researcher as well as respondents, correct? So the contract has to be respected. Maintaining secrecy, reasonable research results, protection of data, safety of rights. So safety of rights of both the respondents as well as the researcher, acceptance by special persons, plagiarism, research within legal framework, safety measures. So these are the few ethical issues that has to be followed in business research. So we shall discuss one by one in detail now. So the first one is informed consent. Now what do I mean by informed consent? Of course, when a researcher wants to collect some information from the respondents. So here the respondents has to know for what purpose the researcher is collecting the information. So there are mainly two parties, correct? One will be the researcher, other one will be the respondents. Now here, while the researcher collects the information from the respondents has to know why the researcher is collecting that particular information. So informed consent means what? The business researcher must explain the objectives of the research to all the individuals who are covered under the scope of research. For example, if the researcher wants to collect information from a group of 100 people. Now, before collecting the information, the researcher has to clearly explain to these 100 respondents about the objective of his research. What is the purpose of collecting that information from these 100 respondents? So, this is also one of the ethical issues. Without knowing what is the purpose of collecting the information, so it is a unethical way to collect the information. So the first one is what? The business researcher must explain the objective. So he has to explain the objective of his research work to the respondents or from the person or to the person from whom the information is being collected. So the objective of the researcher to all those individuals who are covered under the scope of research. Now here I have given the example of 100 respondents. Now these 100 respondents are covered under the research. Now being a researcher, he has to explain all the objectives to these 100 respondents. While obtaining feedback from them, he should explain the objectives of research and should continue their relationship. So what he has to do, there should be a proper or there should be a good relationship between the respondents as well as the researcher. Then only the respondents will give sufficient information to the researcher. Without knowing the objective to the respondents, it is highly difficult for the researcher to collect the information. If any feedback or information is obtained from the respondents without informing them the objective of research, it is against the ethical standards. So this is a main thing what the researcher has to keep in his mind, that whenever he collects the information from the respondents has to know what is the purpose of collecting the information. So here researcher has to convey the objectives as well as the purpose of research while collecting the information. Hope you are clear with the first point. Now coming to the second one, respecting the contract. Of course, there is a contract between the researcher as well as the other organization or institutions who will give the information to the researcher. So there should be a proper contract. There should be a good contract between these two parties. So it is quite natural to enter into a formal agreement. So normally what the researcher will do, they will go through the formal agreement. So they will enter into the formal agreement with various organizations in the process of business research. Suppose if the researcher wants to collect the information from the organizations or from any other institutions, what they will do? They will enter into the contract while collecting the information. So before collecting the information, they have to enter into the contract. So it may be contract between the researcher as well as the organization, or researcher as well as the institution before collecting the information. It may be for data collection or for office staff members' opinion or for statistical analysis. Suppose if they want to collect the information about the office staff, then there will be an agreement between the office staff as well as the researcher. In the same way, so there will be a contract between the parties. In this situation, the researcher must respect the terms of the agreement and continue his research work. Now what is the ethical issue here? He has to agree to the terms of agreement and follow the terms and conditions of that particular agreement between the researcher as well as the respondents. So in this situation, the researcher, so in the point of researcher we are telling, so in the point of researcher, he has to make sure that he has to agree to all the terms and conditions of that agreement of the respondents. In any case, he should not disrespect the contents of the contract for personal gain. Whatever may be the reason, whatever may be the situation, here the researcher should not avoid continuing the agreements or continuing the terms and conditions of the agreement. So he has to follow all the terms and conditions. So this is also one of the important ethical issues. Now coming to the third one, maintaining secrecy. Now, of course, the respondents will give the information to the researcher believing him, so he has to maintain secrecy. So there are certain things or there are certain information which cannot be revealed to the outsiders. So here the researcher, what he has to do, he has to promise the respondents that no information will be leaked. So he will keep all the information in secrecy. The business research process involves various informants or respondents. Of course, when the researcher wants to collect the information, he has to meet the respondents, correct? The information collected from them should not be unnecessarily disclosed or disseminated. Now, what he has to do? Whatever the information which is collected from the respondents, a researcher has to make sure that this information is not leaked in public. So, they have to maintain a secrecy of information. If he unnecessarily discloses the information, it may mean that informant's interest is disrespected and it is an unethical one. Suppose if researcher reveals all the secrecy of the respondents, then he is going to cheat the respondents because the respondents have given the information with a good faith. So the researcher has to maintain that secrecy of information which is given by the respondents. Suppose he wants to reveal that information, then he has to take permission from the respondents, then he can reveal the information. Next one is reasonable research results. Now, what is this reasonable research results? When research is conducted on ethical grounds, the researcher is able to provide reliable results. Of course, when the researcher follows or when the researcher conducts his research work in an ethical manner, then of course the data collected or the information collected by the researcher will be reliable one. This implies that the research is ethical only when it is conducted on virtual facts. So it has to be conducted on a virtual facts or it has to be conducted on a ethical manner. Sometimes research is conducted just to satisfy the employer or from whom research work is accepted. So here, being a researcher, he should not do his work for the sake of others. Suppose information has to be collected to an organization and the researcher is going to collect the information from the respondents. In that situation, researcher has to think that he is doing his work and he has to conduct the research work. He should not think that he is doing work for the institution. He has to think that he is doing the work for himself so that he will do the work properly. So sometimes research is conducted just to satisfy the employer. So here the researcher should collect the information to satisfy himself, not to satisfy the employer of a particular organization or institution, or for whom research work is accepted. Then one cannot expect reasonable research results from the study. So if it is not conducted in this manner, then the researcher will not get the information properly. He will do the work for the sake of others. So he has to think that he is doing the work for himself, then he will do it properly. Sometimes the research is conducted for a sponsoring agency to satisfy its requirement. In that situation also, reasonable results cannot be or will not be there. This is also against the ethics. So here what the researcher has to do, researcher should not work for the sake of others or for any other institution. Even though he is working for others, he has to make sure that he is doing the work for himself. Then only he can satisfactorily do the work, or even the results what they are going to get will also be reasonable. So if he is not going to conduct in that manner, then he will not get the reasonable results, which means he is not following the ethical issues of business research. Next one is protection of data. So whatever the data which is collected from the respondents, so it has to be protected properly by the researcher. The data should not be used publicly without the permission of the report submitting person. Now, as I have told you, they have to maintain secrets because certain respondents have believed the researcher so much and they have given the information. In that situation, researcher also has to maintain secret and he don't have any right to publicly disclose those data. The researcher should not share the respondents' beliefs, behavior, opinion and other data without their consent. So without their consent or without their permission, he cannot or the researcher cannot disclose any of the information. So it may be relating to the respondents' beliefs, behavior, opinion and any other personal data. This kind of leakage may deteriorate the dignity of the research and sometimes it may lead to loss of jobs of the employees who have provided the data to the researchers. Therefore, protection of data is utmost important. So, here the researcher has to keep in his mind no information is leaked. If he is going to leak the information, he has to take the permission from the respondents. So, it affects both the research work at the same time the respondents also. For the research work, because the value of the research work goes on decreasing, at the same time the value of respondent also goes on decreasing if the personal information is being revealed in public. So, here the next ethical issue is protection of data. It should not be publicly disclosed. Next one is safety of rights. So, the next ethical issue of business research is safety of rights. Safety of rights of those individuals will come in the way of research is one of the research standards. So, this is also one of the important research standard, that is to take care of the safety of the person who are involved in the research work. The aggressive attitude of the rights of others is not considered as a research conducted within the scope of ethical issue. So, here being a researcher, he has to take care or he has to make sure that the respondents are very safe. So, this is also one of the ethical issues. Next one is acceptance by special groups. So, let us see what is this ethical issue. So there are special groups of persons in the society. Sometimes the researcher has to collect their opinion from them. So let us see who are the special persons. So there are special individuals in the society from whom the researcher wants to collect the information. For example, disabled, lunatics, captives, children, etc. belong to this category. So these are the special group of people from whom the information has to be collected by the researcher. Researchers should exercise greater care and caution while obtaining feedback or opinion from them. So of course, they require more care. So while collecting the information by the researcher from these type of special group of people, here the researcher has to take utmost care while collecting the information. He should obtain information within the framework determined in the research design. This ensures their right protection and considered as a moral research. So if he takes care of this special group of people, then it means that he is following the ethical issues of business research. He should obtain feedback on ethical principles only. So this is about acceptance by special groups. Next one is plagiarism. Now what do you mean by plagiarism? The researcher is prohibited from the use of printed articles, theories, assumptions and result of other researchers without their permission in writing. Now being a researcher, he cannot copy the views of other researchers. So he has to ask permission, then only he can take those articles or take those sentences from other researchers. Suppose he copies, then it means that he is not following the ethical issue of research, because research means what? Finding out of new things, correct? So here he cannot copy from some other person, which leads to plagiarism. If the researcher has obtained the help of others, he should acknowledge for their services. Suppose he has taken the help of other researcher or any other person, then he has to give an acknowledgement for the service which is being provided. In case he has obtained the results of other researcher, he should acknowledge for their information. So whatever the information what he has taken from other researchers, so he should give a proper acknowledgement for that. It means that if he is going to copy from others, so it leads to plagiarism, which means he is not following the ethical issues of business research. If he has taken away the research results of others, it will amount to plagiarism, which is punishable as per legal provisions. So I have told you here the researcher has no right to take some others' information. So suppose he has taken, it leads to plagiarism and it will ultimately punishable as per legal provisions. So suppose he has taken, he has to take permission, then he can take information. At the same time, he has to give an acknowledgement for the information or the services which is being used by him. Suppose it is not, then it leads to plagiarism. Next one is research within legal framework. Of course, each and every activity has to be conducted as per legal framework. Even for starting up of a company or closing down a company, so it has to be done as per legal framework only. In the same way, research should also be conducted as per the legal framework. In the sense, they has to follow all the legal rules and regulations of that particular aspect. Now, research within legal framework. The business researcher must carry out research work within the legal framework. So they have to follow all the rules and regulations of the government, then only they can conduct the research properly. Therefore, the researcher should know the various acts and their provisions which will influence the research procedure. So whenever a particular activity is being conducted, so he has to make sure that he knows all the acts as well as provisions relating to that particular activity. Suppose he want to collect the information on a particular topic, then he has to know the legal framework which is involved in that particular topic. That is all the acts as well as the provisions relating to that particular topic. So if he don't follows, then it means what? He is following unethical issues of business research. So he has to follow, then he has to conduct the business research activity. Next one is safety measures. Now, what are the safety measures that has to be taken? Of course, I have told you here, being a researcher, he has to take care of the respondents also. That is, he has to see through the safety of the respondents also, because there are special group of people where the information is being given to the researcher. In that situation, it may affect them also by giving the information. Certain personal aspects, certain personal issues will also be given to the researcher. In that situation, those personal issues which cannot be revealed outside, which may damage the respondent. In that situation, researcher has to take the safety measures of those respondents. The approach of ethical research is to identify potential problems during research and even after the publication of results. So, even before the publication of results also, or after publication of results, researcher has to make sure that he will take care all the safety measures to do the research work properly. To conduct the research work properly, he has to take all the safety measures. It may be in terms of respondents, or it may be in terms of any other organization, or it may be in terms of any other institutions. Nowhere, nothing has to be damaged in the research work. So, he has to take care of everything. That is, he has to take care all the safety measures relating to research. So, these are the few ethical issues in business research. So, let us see one by one here. So, informed consent. So, I have told you, what do you mean by informed consent? Here, when the researcher wants to collect the information from the respondents, what he has to do? He has to tell all the objectives. What is the purpose of conducting research activity to the respondents? Because each and every respondent has to know why he has to give the information to the researcher. So, here the researcher has to inform the respondents about the purpose and objectives of research. And the next one is respecting the contract. Of course, in certain situations, the researcher might get into an agreement while collecting the information. In that situation, what he has to do? He has to respect the contract. He has to respect the terms and conditions of the contract. And the next one is maintaining secrecy. Of course, there are certain respondents who have given their personal information to the researcher believing him. In that situation, he should maintain secrecy. If he don't maintain secrecy, then it will ultimately affect the respondent's interest. In that situation, here each and every respondent or each and every researcher has to maintain the secrecy about the information which is being provided by the respondents. Next one is reasonable research results. So, whatever the results what they are getting, so he has to see through that it is his work and he has to conduct the business or business research activity. So, whenever he collects the information, he has to think that he is collecting the information for himself. Suppose certain researcher will provide information or gather the information and give them to other institutions. In that situation also, he has to see through that he is collecting the information in a reasonable manner. He is not working for others. He is working for himself. Then only he will get proper result. Next one is protection of data. So, I have told you, so there are variety of respondents who will provide the information to the researcher. So, it is a duty of the researcher to protect the data which is given by the respondents. Suppose he wants to reveal it publicly, then he has to take the permission from the respondents, then only he can reveal the information. And the next one is safety of rights. So, here the researcher has to be very clear with the safety of each and every individual who are involved in the research work. That is, he has to take care of their safety. Next one is acceptance by special persons. No, there are special group of people like lunatics or any other children from whom the information has to be collected. In that situation, it is the duty of the researcher to accept the information which is given by the special group of people in the society. Next one is plagiarism. So, this I have told you, researcher, he cannot copy anything from any other researcher. Suppose he wants to copy, he has to take the permission and he has to write the acknowledgement from whom he has taken the service or information. Suppose he is copying from others, so it leads to plagiarism, which means that it is legally punishable. research within the legal framework. So each and every activity which is being conducted, so it has to be done as per the legal framework. Next one is safety measures. So in the whole research activity, so they have to take all the safety measures while collecting the information. So these are the few ethical issues which has to be followed in business research. Hope you have gone through each and every point here. So in my next session, I am going to discuss this topic, that is business research process. A very important topic for your exam, that is business research process. So my dear students, hope you have understood the session today. So we have discussed about ethical issues in business research. See you all in the next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.